Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So thank you for the introduction. And thanks to Oscar and his team for setting up this kickoff and this day and the project. So first of all, a couple of words of where I'm from. I think this is important because it will help you understand a little bit the structure that I gave this presentation. Okay, here, that's the remote that I was looking for. I realized that there are a lot of people in the room and a lot of people in the consortium that actually are not the usual stakeholders that participate in the projects that we finance in my unit in DG Connect. As it was mentioned, DG Connect, G1, Data Policy and Innovation. But a lot of people here actually participate more often than not or are part of the different stakeholder groups of what we call digitizing European industry strategy. So this is a different strand of what we do that is managed by my colleagues of Directorate A. So while in the Commission we got all the same overall goals and we pursue a strategy to achieve these goals that are overall are more growth and jobs for Europe, so we have different strands in which we do and in which we operate. But you will recognize that there is quite some convergence in the approach that we take in supporting projects like Boost that is being financed by a unit that takes care of big data and big data policies and data policies in general, as opposed to what our colleagues, well actually not as opposed to, but in synergy with what our colleagues do in the Digitizing European Industry unit. So let me try to change the slide. Well, So I don't have so much time allocated for the presentation. I don't want to bore you too much with the policy document that the Commission issues, but I think it's important that you understand that we come from somewhere, and it's actually quite many years that the Commission has been investing on data technologies and on big data technologies in particular. So it's from 2003 that the Council has given the Commission the mandate to operate in this environment, and so here I propose in the slides a list of communications in which the Commission has described its policy and the actions that it was going to undertake over the next years. So here I would like to mention one that is very important because it laid out the basis for what we call public-private partnership on data. So many of you know that there is a public-private partnership that has been established a few years ago called Big Data Value Public Partnership, coordinated by an umbrella organization called BDVA, Big Data Value Associations, of which many of you are part and follow the works of. So towards a thriving data-driven economy, that was the title of that communication, which was followed by other ones from the digital single market, but also of digitizing European industry, in which, of course, the data economy is a big part, and big data technologies are one of the pillars building that strategy. So here, the presentations probably can be made available by Oscar. So here there are links. I think it's useful if you guys, at some point during the course of this project, better at the beginning than at the end, take a look at what this communication actually. They're not very long documents, but they give you a good overview of what the policy strategy is. So here, basically, there was a mandate from the Council on doing something, acting upon a problem that is becoming a problem, that is keeping the competitiveness of European industry where it is strong to make it more strong. So there are several sectors that, as you guys know, are being stolen by other parts of the world that are investing very heavily on digital technologies. And there are actors that before were not actually actors that were involved in very many verticals of the industries, but they're still taking the lead because they're stronger on the intelligence side of the story. So it is important that the European industry transform itself around digital technologies, and for what we are very particularly concerned in my unit is about data technologies and through the uptake of big data technologies to remain competitive on the world stage. And this is basically the very goal of this list of communication that I list here. So more recent policy developments of what we are doing in the unit and in the Commission. So we are working to make sure that in Europe there is a consistent free flow of non-personal data, so that this non-personal data can actually pass the border easily and be worked on by other companies in other member states. This is very important in an industry like yours, like the manufacturing industry, because there is the need to find technology providers and partners to help you out in transforming your own operations. And likewise, there is a need to support the B2B context, so the business-to-business data exchanges with whatever policy actions may be required, and maybe not even policy actions, but just, for example, helping out people establishing contracts. So a lot of these things are happening already through contract law, but there may be a need to support players that are not already familiar with this kind of contracts to be more familiar with them, and this is something that we are also working on. And of course, this is valid not only for this particular vertical of the manufacturing industry that you are addressing, but data has become an important asset throughout the industry, throughout several industries. So it is important that we make sure that we have the means to make this data available for industry. And one of these means is to create industrial data platforms, and this is something we're also working on also through Horizon 2020. And one of the means that we have to achieve these goals are also projects like Boost 4.0 that will establish one of such data platforms in Spain. So very, very important, I think, to show off how certain things become possible through policy and through policy implementation, like the funding of these projects. Now, so here are at least some strategic objectives of why certain things that we do are important. As I mentioned, we want to maintain leadership in the industry in general, and of course in the manufacturing one, but also become world leader for what concerns big data technologies applied to industry where it makes sense applying. Then we want to support the creation of data markets, and this industrial data platform is surely one of the support tools that we use. And then, as I said at the beginning, so the overall and overarching goal that we have at the Commission is try to create better conditions for Europe, and so more growth and more jobs and more qualified jobs for Europe. And then, consistently with the strategy of digitizing European industry that I mentioned before and that our colleagues follow more closely, so we want to make sure that the whole industrial Europe transforms its operations, its products and services through the use of digital technologies and through the use of data technologies, because that's the way that the world is going right now. That's the people that will become masters of their technologies will have the competitive edge that will make their industries more competitive, and they will help them basically stay relevant on the market. Now, here what I list is why we fund these projects, this what we call lighthouse project like Boost. So it's a little bit where we're coming from. This is a slide that I took from actually the presentation that I used to give when potential proposers wanted to apply for such a project. Now, I want to also give you one example that I think is still very relevant to explain why the general wording that I just mentioned are important. So then translated into your own industry, and we'll try to see with later on in the day how this translate to. And that was also a little bit one of the reasons why we're doing this in practice. Now, many of you will be familiar with a company that is called HERE, that is a mapping company. So this company used to be a business division of Nokia. So this was not one of the part of Nokia that was spun off to Microsoft when they sold the mobile phone divisions. It was still an active business division of Nokia. So why is this important in this storytelling? It's important because at some point a few years ago, this business branch was put on sale by Nokia. And this is a very, very important digital mapping company that owns and develops digital mapping. So you know what digital mapping is extremely important for. So geospatial technologies are important in very many different sectors of the economy, but there is one in which it became a strategic asset. And this one is called automotive industry. So here there are some representatives of the automotive industry. So I'm sure they know that digital mapping is one key enabler of the development of self-driving cars. So the European industry was the European automotive industry was actually quite concerned of the sale of this data asset, because if these data assets would have been in the hands of other non-European companies, so the Americans, the Chinese, it would have been quite a problem for the European industry to develop its own strategy on self-driving cars. Why that? Because, as I mentioned before, in generic terms, there are companies that are not necessarily involved with a very specific business domain, and in this case, automotive. Name Apple, name Google, there are these companies that are, not traditionally focused on metal. They're focused on the intelligence, but they are the ones that are developing self-driving cars, and they make the news all the time. Of course, the European industry is doing that as well. But if this very particular asset of the digital mapping would have not been under their own control, it would have been quite a significant problem. So that's why collectively, the German automotive industry, which represents still a big chunk of the European one, has decided to collectively purchase these assets, and for an undisclosed amount of several billions euros, they retain control of this asset that is necessary to transform their own operations and to develop new products and services around a data assets in which they need to be in control. So this is what we mean by transforming the European industry around data assets. That's, I think, quite an example that can be replicated, of course, not necessarily within the same budgets of billions, but the kind of concept that has been developed by that purchase collectively by that industry tells you that there is a need to invest in data assets and data technologies to reinvent the industry itself, and to make sure that it stays relevant, as I was saying before. Now, so these slides tell you exactly what in the story that I just described. Why we invest in such projects? We invest in such projects because we want the European industry to be out there and gain its own competitive edge on the world market. So we've got overall, four projects, including Boost 4.0, that are similar in nature and that they result from the same strategy. So today, I'm very particularly happy to be here with you because this is the start of this project is the end of a journey and the start of another one. So as I described before, we do a lot of policy work in support of the funding that we released Horizon 2020, and the start of such a project is the end of a policy cycle, if you want, and the start of the implementation of this policy. So this is very exciting to see how this project will be rolled out over the next 3 years with you. So the other projects that we have one is called Transforming Transport, addressing the transport and logistics sectors. Another one is Data Bio, whose coordinator is here in the room. And it's addressing agriculture, fisheries, and forestry. So these two projects have been running for 1 year already. They started in January 2017. And then we got two new projects, including Boost 4.0, that started in January this year, together with Big Medelytics, coordinated by Philips, addressing the health domain. Then I mentioned at the beginning of the speech the Big Data Value PPP. So you guys became part of a big family here. May I ask to raise your hands, how many of you have touched base with the Big Data PPP or are aware of what it is? If you know, please raise your hands. Okay, so almost everybody, so I don't need to spend too many words, but what I want to say here is that we have set up this public-private partnership with the very scope of this project, basically, to facilitate industry to take up big data technologies and to support research and innovation on big data technologies. Now, this is an open partnership that encompasses several actors of the value chain of the economy. So there are research and development organizations, being them academia or industries. There are companies willing to adopt big data technologies. There are big data providers. So overall, a platforms that will support and is supporting actually through its own operations the adoption of big data technologies in Europe and the transformation of the European industry itself. So this is an open platform, so anybody can join. If you're not, I invite you to take a look at what the organization is doing. But why do I mention that you have become part of a big family? Because what we want to do with this platform and with the project that we have is to collaborate together. So more often than not, there are convergence in the work that you do, if not some overlap. And so we would like to facilitate the exchanges as much as possible so that your knowledge become other people's knowledge, and if there are strengths that can be exploited by somebody else in an easier fashion, this transfer can happen. but also if there are some overlaps, because we realize that, a lot of these projects address very similar projects in nature. These things can be either done together or removed. And I give one example of very relevant work that has been done commonly. This may not be so relevant for you guys that address non-personal data. You address industrial data sets. Probably don't have this project so prominent, although there are aspects that may be important in that. You know that in May this year there will be the General Data Privacy Regulation that come into force. So a lot of the projects that we run have to face the implementation of the GDPR. So there is some common work that can be done, because there is a common understanding that needs to be made, first of all, and then there needs to be the translation into the technological platforms of the implementation of the GDPR. So there is a lot of work that is common to everybody that is not really dissimilar, so people can join forces around this topic. And this one was one topic that was identified as a commonality of them. So if you participate in this PPP, there are benefits that you guys can take, and there are also fruits that you can give others. So I think it's important that Oscar is very engaged in the operations. So if some of you wants to come and take a look at how it works, you're welcome to do so. So here I took a slide from my colleagues of the Digitizing European Industry. So my time, I think, is about up. But what I wanted to show you is that the story that I gave you on the strategy that we are trying to roll out, the industrial strategy we're trying to roll out with the PPP and with the policy and with the Horizon 2020 funding that we manage in the unit that I belong to, is entirely consistent with what our colleagues are doing in the Digitizing European Industry strand of the policy making in the Commission. So transforming the European industry, having a set of platforms that supports the exchanges, that support the data exchanges, I would say, but also the competitiveness. And then a regulatory framework that supports all the operations, and of course prepare the workforce to have the skill set that are necessary to take the new job and the skill job that are necessary to carry out the work. And of course, try to coordinate all these activities that are taking place at the European level with national ones. And here in particular in Boost, there will be this setup of the industrial data space for Spain, which I think is going to be one nice implementation of exactly this kind of policies that we develop. So here, the objective of Boost that I hope you know very well. I took it from your description of work. And exactly what you're doing is translating those policies into reality. And it's going to be tough because this is a large project of 50 partners.